Hey everybody, what's up? Jubitaz back with a new video for y'all, where today we're gonna be looking at the biggest nerfs in Naruto. The term nerf indicates that a character is in a weakened state and cannot perform to the best of their abilities. Nerfs can be applied to a person's mental state or their physical condition, like injuries or illnesses. And nerfs are also a very useful plot device in an anime. It's the best way to get the protagonist to defeat an antagonist that's way beyond their skill level, by nerfing that villain to oblivion. That's in general how the protagonists were able to defeat members of the Akatsuki despite being so outclassed by them. So today, I've decided to tackle the biggest nerfs of Naruto. I'll be ranking these nerfs based on how severe they were, how long those nerfs lasted, and whether they were mental or physical. Now, if this is your first rodeo with us, then may I suggest smashing that subscribe button to become part of the Jubitaz family. And otherwise, let's get straight to it. Number 8, I got Deidara at the end of the Kazekage rescue arc. I'm talking about how nerfed he was when he lost both arms. The first was crushed by the Kazekage sand, and the second was warped away to a different dimension by Kakashi's Mangekyo Sharingan. That left Deidara armless against both Team Kakashi and Team Guy. Like, my guy literally had to fight Guy and his squad with a kunai in his mouth. Now, Deidara isn't the only character to be nerfed by losing an arm. In fact, many shinobi lose their arms. But the nerf is a lot more severe for him because Deidara can't really perform his signature jutsu without the mouths on his palms. At that point, Deidara's best bet is to eat the detonating clay, which is how he was able to escape the ambush. Though I didn't rank this nerf any higher because it was just temporary, and the next time we see Deidara, he has both his arms reattached thanks to the help of Kakuzu. Number 7, I got the Yellow Flash Minato Namikaze when he was revived in the 4th war. Now this will be our first and only entry, which was primarily a mental nerf, which happens when the 4th Hokage finds out that the masked man that attacked the village so long ago was his own student, Obito. Minato genuinely believed that had he found out Obito's true identity back then, he could have possibly prevented this future conflict and maybe even saved his wife, Kushina. So Minato low-key blamed himself for the current affairs and the war. And he even felt worse when Obito started scolding him for his failures. This left Minato in a daze or stupor, as the databooks described. The 4th Hokage is one of the most cunning shinobi. He was able to counter Kamui almost instantly, but now he was not on his game. He was getting outdone by the 2nd Hokage, and he even lost his arm due to how distracted and off game he was. Minato finally gets over his stupor thanks to his son Naruto standing up to Obito, and he's able to fight and coordinate a lot more effectively then. Number 6, we got our pal Rock Lee during his turn in the preliminaries in the Chunin exams. We all remember that iconic fight when Rock Lee opened the 5th gate and started pummeling Gaara, putting the moves on him. However, the 8 inner gates comes with its fair share of repercussions and straining effects on the user's body. Even just simple body movements can tear muscles and ligaments, and Lee was left in a helpless state once back in base. And then to make matters worse, Gaara was so salty that this kid was able to give him a beating that he broke Lee's leg and arm, leaving him crippled. And he was gonna finish off the job had Might Guy not interfered. Gaara does try to finish off the job later, but that's a discussion for another video. But yeah, Lee was left with severe injuries that nerfed him so badly that his career as a shinobi was practically over. He had to undergo a procedure performed by the best medical ninja in the world, Tsunade, and even then his chances of surviving the surgery were 50-50. And Tsunade had to work on her strategy for quite some time to improve Lee's chances of survival. Now, being the champ that he was, Lee never gave up, and he kept training even when he had those injuries, and luckily for him, his surgery was successful. However, he never got the chance to shine ever since, which is a shame, but he did deal with one of the most severe nerfs of the show. Number 5, I got Obito Uchiha's nerf, which happened in the 4th war. Now, I will say that Obito did have the most severe nerf, The only reason I didn't rank him any higher is because his nerfs were temporary, and the truth is he was supposed to die, and he managed to survive just because of how much of a beast he was. But yeah, after Obito had the tailed beasts ripped out of him, he was left near death, clinging on to life thanks to the Ghetto Mazo. And then he had the Ghetto Mazo summoned out of him by Madara, and then on top of that, he was made to perform the Rinne rebirth when Black Zetsu hijacked his body. Zetsu explains that the only reason Obito didn't die yet was because it was attached to him. But even then, when he's barely clinging on to life, he's able to briefly regain control over his body. It's not until Madara got his second Rinnegan that Obito was finally rendered unconscious. And even then, Naruto was able to bring him back to life. The white-haired Obito with both MS was severely nerfed. He should have been dead. Of course, Kishimoto couldn't give Prime Obito both his Mangekyo Sharingan, then he'd be easily the most cracked character. But even in this nerfed state, he was still able to traverse Kaguya's dimensions with the help of Sakura, and he was also able to fight off the extreme gravity of the dimension to intercept Kaguya's attack. I do think this is probably the most extreme nerf in the show, but considering that it was a situational nerf, I figured I'd rank the more permanent nerfs higher. Number 4, I got Nagato, and you'll notice that a lot of the Akatsuki higher-ups have severe nerfs so that the MCs can defeat them. Nagato, when he was operating as Pain, was actually very nerfed. His main body was left crippled after he used the Ghetto Mazo against Hanzo's men. The only way he could control the statue was through having several black rods pierce his body, so that he could get linked to it. Those rods would remain in his back, which greatly weakened him. He was in no condition to fight, and on top of that, his feet were burned and rendered useless after the Hanzo encounter. However, Nagato still had enormous pools of chakra and the Rinnegan, so one thing he did was use his chakra by channeling it through 6 puppet bodies. Now, even though the pains were quite strong, Prime Nagato is way more powerful, and we got to see that in action when Nagato was revived in the war. He was able to dominate the Jinchuriki duo and use all of the 6 paths abilities, which kind of proves how nerfed he was. It's never explained why he never healed himself. Maybe the damage caused by the Ghetto statue was irreversible. He probably had to summon the statue before, so he may have been rendered immobile due to being the leader and having to summon the statue for dealing with the tailed beasts, and that's why he used the paths of pain to compensate for his immobility. Number 3 is Orochimaru. Despite creating the eternal life jutsu that allowed him to live on forever by swapping bodies every 3 years, that jutsu came at a severe cost. Every new body that Orochimaru possessed could last for about 3 years, and towards the end of that time frame, the host body starts to reject Orochimaru, which is a heavy nerf. And Orochimaru's had this nerf amplified after his battle with the 3rd Hokage, when the 3rd used the Reaper to rob Orochimaru of his arms, leaving him unable to perform all the jutsu that he'd mastered. This left Orochimaru in his most weakened state, as he couldn't use his arms at all, and the time he had left in his current vessel was limited. Ultimately, he was so nerfed that he couldn't even wait for Sasuke and had to pick an arbitrary vessel, a shinobi named Ginyu-Maru. If we fast forward to Shippuden 2.5 years later, when Orochimaru faced the Four Tails, he was still nerfed to an extent, but not severely. He was able to go toe-to-toe with V2 Naruto and use his arms for the summoning jutsu, though he still couldn't use them to weave hand seals, so he was still nerfed in that regard. And then during the final days of the vessel, Orochimaru is so nerfed that he's left bedridden, coughing up blood. Even Sasuke made a remark about how weakened Orochimaru was at the end. I guess the idea is that Orochimaru wouldn't need to keep swapping bodies once he found the perfect vessel. Orochimaru's nerf was very severe, but I didn't rank it higher since the nerf was periodic, and these were the consequences of the jutsu that he created in the first place. Number 2 is Kimimaru, who had an unnamed chronic illness since his birth that kept on deteriorating as he got older. Not much is told to us about this disease, though it's believed to be linked to Kimimaru's Kekkei Genkai, as he was the only one from the Kaguya clan to inherit that ability, and considering that it originated from Kaguya, it makes sense that it would have detrimental effects on a mortal body. Kimimaru was meant to be the perfect vessel for Orochimaru, more desirable than even Sasuke. However, this condition prevented him from being that perfect vessel. Orochimaru and Kabuto tried to stabilize Kimimaru's condition by implanting some of Jugo's DNA to give him the curse mark, and while the curse mark was compatible with Kimimaru, it still didn't cure his illness. His condition kept worsening until he was left incapacitated. Even a medical ninjutsu prodigy like Kabuto couldn't do anything to ease his condition. He could only keep him alive through medical machinery and life-supporting apparatus. What's interesting about Kimimaru's nerf was that it was so severe that it left him paralyzed, and everyone believed that he shouldn't be able to move at all. When he goes to retrieve Sasuke, it's explained that he no longer relied on his flesh to move, but sheer willpower, because of his devotion to Orochimaru and his disappointment in himself for not being able to be the perfect vessel, that he had to secure the next vessel, Sasuke. So you could say that when Kimimaru went up against the rookies, he was extremely nerfed, to the extent that he quite literally dropped dead in the middle of the fight and finally succumbed to his illness. And for number 1, I got Itachi Uchiha, who was stricken with a deadly illness that left him with severe fatigue and a very nerfed stamina. This is another disease that we don't get a lot of details on in the anime. It's the same illness that many within the fanbase call Ninja AIDS. There have actually been many fans that have attempted to run a real diagnosis on what type of fatal disease Itachi may have harbored. Many believe that it's microscopic polionitis, or MPA for short, which is an autoimmune disorder that has similar symptoms to the ones Itachi was displaying in his final battle with Sasuke, such as hemoptysis, which is coughing up blood, as well as chest pain and shortness of breath. Like with Kimimaru, this was an illness that deteriorated with time. Obito said that Itachi took some unnamed medication to prolong his life so that he could face Sasuke, which means that Itachi was meant to die much earlier. And of course, the nerf was amplified by the effects of the Mangekyo Sharingan, which put additional strain on his body and left him near blind. By the time he was facing Sasuke, he was the shell of the shinobi he once was. And even the spectator Zetsu noticed that Itachi should have been able to dodge these attacks easily. Considering how much of a prodigy he is, like, he was so nerfed that he couldn't even fool Zetsu into thinking that he was giving it his all. And towards the end of the fight, the symptoms of the illness became more evident, and again, like Kimimaru, Itachi dies, succumbing to his disease. I ranked Itachi this high because he's essentially nerfed throughout the entirety of the series. It's just a lot more severe in the final battle. And then when he's revived at a much healthier state, we get to see how truly cracked a prime Itachi would look like. And those have been the nerfs that I selected for today's list. It's not to say that there aren't any more nerfs that I can talk about. It was stated in the Retsuden novels and the manga that Naruto developed an idiopathic disease that had once stricken the Sage of the Six Paths due to being a Jinchuriki, and the sage had traveled to the land of Retaku where he was able to find a cure, though we don't really know how much of a nerf that is. We also know that the sage was left severely weakened when he had the 10 tails extracted from within himself to create the 9-tailed beasts, and towards his latter years, he was bedridden. Though being able to survive the extraction for that long is a commendable enough feat. There's also Kakashi, who gets nerfed whenever he uses the Sharingan or its latter stages, but I figured jutsu drawbacks are different, and Kakashi does gain valuable powers from the Sharingan. Also, another nerf to consider is the Edo Tensei nerf. A reanimated shinobi will not be at full power. The nerf is a lot more severe in part 1, because the first and second Hokage are nowhere near their full power. But in Shippuden, despite being slightly nerfed, they're brought back a lot closer to their true strength, though I suppose that's as many nerfs as I could think up. Be sure to drop a like and check out the rest of the channel. You got a couple of spicy options on your screen right now, and we'll talk soon. Peace out.